Hello, this video tutorial is on how to sculpt convincing hands in Zbrush. Although the things that will be in this tutorial you can apply more generally to any sculpting, digital or in different programs, or whether in clay or not. I think hands are quite difficult to make so that they look like they can articulate even, not so they look like they are 5 sausages coming out of a block. So that's kind of what we're trying to make here, a convincing hand that looks like it can articulate. Alright, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to start by making one finger, and then I'm going to copy it many times across the hand to try and cut down a bit of the work of making all the fingers look really good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a cylinder. So there we go, cylinder primitive object, and I'm going to make it a polymesh 3D. There we go, like that. And that just means it's not a primitive object anymore, and I can scale it very easily. I think I'm going to try and have the fingernail be on the left here for this finger. There we go. Something like that. I'm just going to change this my material over to this mud material here. If you don't have this mud material that I'm using, if you're playing along at home, then you can use perhaps this kind of matte cap grey material if you've got it in Zbrush, and this is very good too. Both of them are better than the wax material, because the wax material has this kind of Fresnel effect that makes small cuts seem more pronounced than they will appear when this hand goes out of Zbrush and goes into, I don't know, 3D Max, Maya, Unreal, something like that. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press X on the keyboard so that I've got active symmetry, and what I'm also going to do is I'm going to go to Dynamesh over here in the Tools panel, and I'm going to set the Dynamesh resolution to be 8 and turn on Dynamesh. So it's really nice and low poly, and that means I'll have no trouble with sculpting it and changing it. So I've got some reference that from the internet, and I will put this image in the comments, I guess, a link to it so you can download it if you want. But down here we've got a few sketches from this book by a guy called Stephen Rogers Peck, and it's this book about anatomy, and it's quite good fun because it has anatomical pictures of bones and where the muscles are, but it also has plenty of these pages of sketches kind of breaking down the shapes of the hand and whatever parts of the body it is into kind of more elementary shapes, so you can see how you should be making things. And if you're making the finger as I am, one thing he kind of picks out in his book is he says that if you split the finger into the first, the middle part, and then the part that's nearest the knuckle, this first part here that's got the nail on it, that is supposed to be tapering in its cross-section and in its shape, so it just kind of the cross-section just gets regularly narrower towards the nail. This part that's in the middle, the middle section, that should have this kind of hexagonal cross-section to it. And then this part at the back here, this the largest part, that should have a pentagonal cross-section to it. And if you try and do that between each of the different knuckles on your finger, then it'll make it look more natural and not just like a sausage. Alright then. So what I'm going to do is perhaps use the smooth tool and the move tool to try and make the first part of the nail here with the first part of the finger with the nail on it, sorry. There you go. There we go. find if you're trying to perhaps make planar areas on your model, like you might want to do here when you're trying to shape these parts of the finger up here to be hexagonal or pentagonal in the cross section. You can use the smooth tool. If you use it in like just this area here, for example, if you're trying to make this part planar, if you move it just around that area and not outside that bounds, it'll average out all of the orientation of all of the polygons, so they all face in the kind of general direction of this this plane here. You can use the flattened brush as well, or the polish brush, but I find the smooth brush is quite good, and if you're just trying to make trying to work on the model, especially when it's at quite a low level of subdivision. Fingernails as well. I think you've got to don't feel perhaps when you're making this finger at the beginning that you've got to make the nail be exactly like the reference. I mean, it'd be nice if you could make it like the reference, but when you look at all different kinds of fingers, like if I look at these other, perhaps look at like this hand up here, look at the shape of the fingernails there, and the shape of the fingernails here. Some people have very wide fingernails, some people have very narrow, kind of long fingernails. Some people, if they've been biting their fingernails may only be like, might only be like that really. So that you've got, don't feel it's got to be like absolutely 100% like what you see in your picture. Just make sure it's got these kind of characteristics. I think the most important thing in the fingers, perhaps I'd say, is getting the proportions of the fingers, so that like this length, these lengths here are correct compared to the overall length of the finger, but I'll talk about that in a second. And also getting these cross sections that are kind of talked about here. So that's what it's all about. Okay. I'm going to kind of I reckon I'm going to have my knuckle there, and I'm going to have my wrinkle underneath the finger, something like that. Just try and round this off a bit. When you're trying to put wrinkles in and things like that, it can be quite useful to use the standard tool and an alpha that's one of these ones here, number 37, 38, something like that, where you've got a little hotspot of influence at the centre, and that can just help you put like a wrinkle in like that. There we go. That's going to be where the joint is, and then the wrinkle's going to be up here. I think it's time. Okay, I think that's where the fingernail's going to go. I'll just make it a little bit wider. I think I feel that's the right thing to do. And perhaps what I'm also going to do is do that a bit, so I know the fingernail's going to go in there in a little bit, and use the smooth tool round and round to try and flatten that off. Is what I'm going to do is just talk about the proportions here of the fingers. When you think about fingers here, how far should it be up the finger before you get to this kind of first knuckle here? Well, what you can do is you can, if you define your fingernail as being this long, okay, if you go one fingernail's length further down towards the knuckle, something like that, that's where you should have your first your first joint there, and then if you go from that knuckle, once you define that, another hole from the fingertip to the first knuckle, a whole one of those lengths further up towards the where this finger joins the main hand, the palm of the hand. That's also the same length there and there. They say as well, although you'll have to look at your reference, that once you define where those two first knuckles are, if you take this distance here, so from the second knuckle that you've made to the fingertip, okay, so that's one distance, one amount, okay. Then if you go that distance up towards the, I don't know, the shoulder and the arm, again, that should be the same distance there. So if you define that, then your fingers will look really right. This last distance that I've just been highlighting here, this distance, by the way, going the distance that's from the fingertip to this second knuckle, notice like I've drawn where the knuckle is down here, like your knuckles are like well back from this edge of the silhouette of your hand. If you look on your hand from the side, like on your own hand, you have to do that. I'm sorry, I don't have a picture for that one. Where the wrinkle is, here we go. Where this wrinkle is on the underside of your hand is not directly below like this here. Okay, this where I've drawn on this image here, this wrinkle on the inside of your hand is actually up here. So that's one thing that's really important to get right. That between here and like where your knuckles are, there's quite there's like a slope running up between each of the fingers. So that's something that's really worth keeping in mind when you're trying to set out your fingers and decide where the knuckles are. Actually, your knuckles on your hand are back here, not over here. Okay, so that's just something worth maintaining. So, okay, right. So I've done my. Okay, that's where my fingernail is. So I'm going to say one fingernail's distance is going to be actually up here, or up. So that's where I want my knuckle to be. So I'll try and make some impression of a knuckle. I think I'm going to use the move tool here. You could use, not the move tool. You could try and use the use something like perhaps the standard tool, but it's as good as anything, I think. There we go. And sometimes the people's fingers, and with this person's fingers, generally at the end closest to the body, what's that? The proximal end, we'll say. That's a bit fatter than perhaps down here. So that's a trend you can try and encourage in your hand, in your finger as you make it. Okay, so let's see. Let me scale that back. Okay, so that's where the knuckle is. Or maybe there. That's where the knuckle's going to be. So where my second knuckle's going to be is up here. So those should all be equal distances. Okay, and I'm going to perhaps try and use the clay brush a bit here to just build up a rough, like, that's where the knuckle's going to go. I think at the moment you're just kind of trying to work out the proportions more than trying to work out the out and out like shape of things. So okay, that's where my knuckle's going to go, and underneath now I'll just try and sculpt in a bit of a wrinkle. It's worth saying as well, this is if we're talking proportions, although I think on this middle finger it's a bit different. If you look at the pinky finger, certainly, like on the underside between these wrinkles, they are these are equal distances roughly. You can see perhaps on this middle finger up here, those two distances there might be the same, but this one might be a bit longer. But generally on the fingers, if you're trying to sculpt a finger like I am, one good finger first to duplicate across the hand, you try and get these distances to be the same. Something like that. These two wrinkles here, this one and this one, these two are underneath these knuckles here, but this one, as I was saying earlier on, is like, let me zoom back. This one is in fact like something like here, and your knuckle is actually back here. So this like final knuckle here is very different to the wrinkle underneath. Okay, something like that. Okay, there we go. And yeah, you can do that if you want. You can push these wrinkles up a little bit. Sometimes that helps to get like a silhouette that goes. It's a bit. That can help a bit to make it look a bit more stylized and read a bit better. To kind of push these wrinkles upwards like that, I find. Okay, so we need to extend the finger back a bit more, just to bring the make this part here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a mask like that, then invert the mask by holding Control. I drew the mask, sorry, if you don't know, by holding Control and dragging a box like this, and then just selecting the end of the finger like that, then holding Control and clicking empty space to invert the mask. And then if you get your transpose tool, you can just drag that back like that to make the rest of the finger. So we're looking for like this to go back as far as this is. So this distance again. So the knuckle's going to be like, the main knuckle's going to be here, and maybe the edge of the hand's actually going to be there. Okay. And this is, at the moment, this is, because I've just stretched the mesh around loads, I need to just, because this is Dynamesh, I need to control and drag in empty space just to retopologize the model. So I've got a bit more, some polygons there to work with and to make it give me enough polygons to sculpt with. So there, like that. Okay, and as I was saying, you know, the finger's getting a bit fatter as it goes towards the stump of it, so I'll do that. Okay. Alright then. What I'm going to do, I think, is I'm going to subdivide the model, and then try and work on improving the shape of perhaps this fingernail area down here, and put a fingernail in. Okay, I'm using the same standard brush here with this alpha that's got a hot spot in the middle. Here we go, something like that. Some people, when they sculpt fingernails and things like that, is they... There we go, not too much. And just put a little bit of a wrinkle in there for that's going to be where the knuckle is. Sometimes what people do is they sculpt it like here, build it with a clay brush, and that's good, but it doesn't. It's hard, perhaps at different levels of subdivision, perhaps as you're working on the model, to keep that shape of the fingernail really crisp. So what I reckon can be a really good idea is if you make a fingernail and put it in there. And one way that I think is worth doing is if you get a cylinder and you, I think this is if I make this a polymesh 3D, if you get something like a cylinder, there we go, something like that, and then use perhaps the move tool by making the fingernail its own sub-tool. It'll always look like really crisp, and that's I reckon a tip worth knowing. Something like that. I'm going to convert this to a Dynamesh, but with a resolution perhaps of 32. Yeah, 32. And I'm going to bend this so it's curved. Some people have very flat fingernails, but I want this to be curved and kind of natural looking. So you can use in deformations. You've got something called S-bend. Now it does bend things and give them a nice smooth curve, but it has it only works in the X, Y, or Z axes. If you look at the S-bend slider, it's got I hope you can see. It's got at the right end of it little X, Y, and a Z, and if you click on these, you can get the this effect, this S-bend deformation effect, to happen in different axes. Now that's pretty good. That's bending it. It's not bending it like I want it to be. So I'm just going to rotate this. There we go, something like that. It works best if I just turn on the floor. The S-bend effect is happening along the 0 kind of y-axis there. So if it can help if you move your fingernail so there's an equal amount on either side of whatever axis you've defined it to this S-bend effect to occur across. There we go, and that's a fingernail. So what I can do now is I can append this subtool that's my fingernail onto the finger that I've been sculpting previously. So if I go into subtools and go down to append, I can append that fingernail in there like that. If you didn't know, by the way, the shortcut for choosing different subtools is to hold down Alt on the keyboard, and then when you click on different subtools, it jumps between them instantly, rather than have to go here and find what the object is and change it like that. So you can see then now, now you've got the fingernail. It looks more like, oh, it looks like a finger. I always find when I hadn't done much, made any hands or anything like that before, and I was trying to become more skilled in it, that it was a bit of a leap of faith at the beginning to try and define all these knuckles and define cross sections and things like that. And it was only then it seemed to be when you put the fingernail on it, you're like, oh, of course, it's a fingernail. But what you can do is it helps if you can try and get the fingernail to sit. Use the standard tool here to get the fingernail to sit in the kind of meat of the finger like that. Quite useful. It does look alright that you've got like a dark fingernail. Let me just smooth that off a bit. And a light finger, but if you don't want that to be, you want the fingernails to be the same colour as the finger proper up here. What you can do is in the subtools menu over here, there's a little paintbrush that you can click on each little subtool, and that turns on the colorizing of the pixels, and it fills them all in with white. And so whether you've got subtools that are active or not, they'll all now be the same value, and it'll look like it's all one piece, something like that. Okay then. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on trying to get this these cross sections to be so in the different parts of the finger. So I think the bit with the fingernail on it, I'm pretty happy with that. That was pretty tapering. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get this this part here, this middle section number 2, to have this kind of pentagonal shape to it. When you're trying to define these like planar qualities of an object, try and look at the reflection on the surface of the object. and this material, it's one that I favour. I quite like it because it's got a little bit of shine to it. If I get a sphere, it's got a little bit of shine to it. There we go. I'll get a sphere in quickly. There we go. It's got a little bit of specularity. As you can see, there's a hot spot here. There we go. And what that means is you can see which surfaces are facing towards the light and which are facing away. And to make it look as though this area here is facing in a different direction to this area here, compared to this area here, once you've used your smooth tool or your polish tool to kind of polish them down to try and make them a bit more plainer, do have a look to see whether the lighting's changed. On this finger here that I've just started to try and define my kind of pentagonal cross-section areas here, and then the other one's going down there out of sight. You can see, if I just get rid of all the interface, that now I've smoothed it, this area has like a different value to this area here because it's facing in a different direction. And that's what you need to look for when you that's how you know you've flattened an area enough and you've made it you've given it a different enough direction to make it plainer, is by looking at the change in the value of the shading as you sculpt it and flatten areas off. There we go. And I'm trying. This part here has to be kind of hexagonal. So there we go. That's the underside there, and that's the side. The good thing about fingers compared to, say, making hands, fingers and hands compared to making, say, faces, you can't see your own face unless you've got a mirror, and you can't look at the screen and look at a mirror. But with hands, you can look at your hand and on your own hand measure. Look at your own hand and see, like, oh, how is my hand made, and how should I be making the knuckles, and how should I be making the tendons on the back of the hand, and the size, the shape of the underside of the hand. So that's something you can do very much. That's really that I'd recommend you do, and that'll help it make your hands look more naturalistic when you've made them. Okay, all right then. So we need now, perhaps to think about making this one here. Oops. This kind of pentagonal, something like that. So in their picture, they had it very flat at the top. Then, if I just zoom back a bit, there we go. On the middle section of the finger here, you had kind of this, and then this plane, and then this one here. On this rearward section here, this third section, you might have a planar part here, but then you should try to be making this planar, the side of the finger be planar all the way down to there, something like that, because this part of the finger only has a five-sided cross section. I'm defining these quite kind of strictly. I'm like quite being heavy-handed in how planar I make these different parts of the finger, because this is quite low polygon density. Like you can see, if I zoom in a bit more, you can see the size of the polygons there. This is because I'm working at quite low polygon. It means that when I subdivide this up to add in more detail, like wrinkles on the knuckles, then the how hard the angular the definition is between one facet of the finger in another, that will kind of dissolve away and it become a bit smoother, more natural looking. And that happens if you work on this at quite low polygon density, rather than trying to define these planar areas at subdivision levels 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. Okay, so here on the underside I'm going to try and get there you go, something like that. So there we go. So that's it. So that makes it look a bit more fingery, like that. So that's it. So I've got 5. Maybe I can draw on it. Maybe I've got 5 different cross sections here. So that's like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in this part here. There we go. And over in this part's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There. And this part down here really doesn't have any cross sections because it's cross-sectional faceted parts because it's supposed to be tapering. So there we go. So that's pretty good for doing. That's one thing that you can do that really will help your finger look like, oh look, before you've done any knuckles, like, oh, it looks like a finger. So that's what you can do. I think, yeah, it'll be alright. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to smooth that off a little bit. And I'm going to start trying to put in the knuckle. Oops. I'm going to start trying to put in the knuckle here. One thing you can do is if your finger looks a bit too straight and a bit like a sausage, not like that this does too much, but one thing I found always used to use, if you use the inflate tool, just a little touch like that, that'll help it blow up the knuckle to make it look like there's some anatomical structures, like fixtures for ligaments and things like that underneath there, rather than it just being like, oh, a lump on the top. I think what I'll do is I think that's just a bit too. I just didn't think the where this wrinkle was underneath and where the lump of the knuckle was actually were in the right place. There we go. All right. When you look here at these wrinkles, try not to just go like and then go, all right, I've put 3 creases in there, that's enough now. What's worth trying to do is look at some reference, or look at your own hands, there you go, and look at how these wrinkles have these overlapping parts of them. Like, for example, if you look at the wrinkle of the skin here, you've got a wrinkle that goes, and how it's asymmetrical. And then this high point here goes off around there. It's not just it's important not just to do with whether there's a wrinkle, but also where the skin has kind of puckered up. So that's one thing that's worth doing. And it really makes it look more naturalistic if you can make these wrinkles be asymmetrical, not be super symmetrical. I think on this finger here, this one, I think it does seem quite symmetrical. So I guess you should have a. But if you can try and make it, I think the fingers always look a bit better if you try and make the wrinkles look a bit more like this, where you've got a wrinkle there, like creases like that, and then the skin where it puckers up goes something like this, where it kind of snakes back on itself. Something like that. Just looking at my reference there. So I'm going to turn off active symmetry, and I'm going to try and sculpt it. Perhaps that's where the wrinkles are going to go, something like that. And then if you change the alpha for your standard brush, perhaps to one of these ones here, that's just generally an even gradient going from the outside to the center, that'll help you and it goes all the way out here to the silhouette of the finger. It might be the case that you need to pull some of these areas, like here, upwards, just to make it so that when you're trying to make these wrinkles that go all the way to the edge of the silhouette of the finger, they don't go all the way down to here. Might be worth using the clay brush a little bit. There we go. I think that's, I don't know. It can be difficult perhaps at these when the resolution's quite low, to kind of get to shape the forms in. There you go. But I think it's worth trying to trying to still make that to be hexagonal in this section down there. It's worth trying to get define these quite big wrinkles in at this low level of subdivision, because it means it'll be easier to do it than to make these big changes to the model than like later on down the road when it's perhaps a bit smoother. There we go, and we got, I don't know, something like that. How's that going? I don't know. There you go. Something like that. Something like that. I think I'll leave that there for now. I don't think I'm making any further headway there. Alright. On the underside, of when you're trying to do this wrinkle on the underside of the finger where this second knuckle is. It can really help you. If you look, like this wrinkle up here is like, oh, it's kind of just a line. But this wrinkle down here, what it can help you to do, and it depends on different people's fingers, but generally you've got like almost like two wrinkles like that. And what it can pay you to do is make this area here flat, and then if you can try and build up this bit here and that bit there, so you've got these two bits that build up to this bit here which is flat, and that can be quite good. So I'll do it on my hand. I'm using the smooth tool, lots and lots backwards and forwards there to smooth that off a bit. And if you look on your own finger, sometimes these two creases, like this one, go up to the edge of the wrinkles. Right up. So there's the wrinkles, and you get a crease that goes all the way up. Like that. I might try and use the clay brush here to just try and maybe sometimes maybe using the inflate brush maybe a little bit. think perhaps here. Okay, I think I've done that now to this second knuckle to a reasonable standard. I think I just need to try and make some of this puckering here that is apparent in this first knuckle. So what I could do is perhaps I could use the clay brush. There we go, something like that maybe. And then what is it? Oops. Perhaps just try and get a little bit of this happening like that. Okay then. All right. So that's my finger. That's my finger there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate it many times. But I think before I duplicate that and put it all around the hand, I need an object to make the palm of the hand. So if you look at the palm of the hand here, not without the fingers, it kind of looks pentagonal in shape. Like if I draw it here, like there you go. That's one side of a pentagon. There's another side of a pentagon. Like that. So what you can do is if you make a pentagonal block in ZBrush, then you can that can be the start of the palm of your hand, something like that. What you can do is to make that one way is if you get a cube and you make it into a polymesh 3D, then and make it flat. So I'll use the transpose tool. Okay, what you can do is you can, if you make it a Dynamesh object, so you've got more polygons to work with there. So I'll make it a Dynamesh object with a resolution of 32, but maybe that's a bit too low. Maybe 128. No, 128 is too high. 64 resolution. Yeah, that kind of resolution there, that's the Goldilocks resolution. What you can do, especially if you make ZBrush see-through, is you can flatten it. What you could do is if you mask off half of it like that, then what you can do is you can use the transpose tool just to do that. So you've got this aspect kind of mapped out like that. Then what you can do is if you invert the mask, you can do that. So now you've got this aspect kind of mapped out. And then you need to try and chop off this bit down here. This bit. So what you can do there is you can if you rotate it like that, mask like that, invert the mask, and then use the transpose tool to flatten that back like that, and that's kind of going to be the body of the palm of your hand, something like that. Now this is there's like, if I press Shift and F to get the polyframe on, you can see how there's lots of overlapping geometry here in the middle and things like that, so that's not very good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Control and drag in empty space to retopologize that with Dynamesh, and now that's something that I can sculpt with and change it however I feel. What I'm going to do is I need to bend this. If you look at a hand from the front, like from the looking down the length of the fingers, what you'll find is that it's not flat like a book, but that there's a curvature. The back of the hand is convex, and this part in here is concave. So what you want it to be is you want the block to be curved, something like that. So what I could do is, if I just make it a little bit thinner, I feel that's the right thing to do, is you can perhaps use the deformation again, use the S bend, perhaps change the orient. There we go. How's that happening? Almost, but it's just in the wrong axis. There we go. Yeah, something like that. In your fingers, like the point where on this block should be the highest is where you have the middle finger like that. If my block is curved like that, you should try and get the point where you're going to have your middle finger as that being the highest. I haven't drawn it very well there. Okay then. There we go. So I guess we'll bring all these objects together in the same file. I'm going to append that block that was my palm. It is too small. Right. You can use the scale aspect of the transpose tool. Whoops. Okay, but how big should it be? How big should I make it? Well, in terms of proportions, if you look on the hand, if you look at your middle finger, the longest finger here, if we say that, like, that's the length from this knuckle of the middle finger, let me just go back. People say that that distance that I've just defined there is the distance back to where the distal heads of your lower arm bones are. So the two kind of bony prominences that are on each side of your wrist are one middle finger's length back from the knuckles here. So that's one thing that's worth noting. Also, when you so if I scale that first, so you can see that where the palm is, it's what you could say as well is that the middle finger to the knuckles, that distance is the same back to the distal ends of the lower arm bones back here at the wrist. But if you go from where the the most full part of the silhouette of the palm is here, if you go back to kind of where the wrist begins, that distance here, that distance A, is the same as the length of the middle finger, something like that. And you've got this kind of overlap here in the middle, where you've got the knuckle is the knuckles here, but the start of the palm's there. So these distances are roughly the same. So when you're scaling things, try to make the length of the palm be that. Okay, right, so what you can do then is, at the moment my fingernail and my finger proper are actually two separate objects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge the finger here into the fingernail, so that both of them now are one artifact that I can move around. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, with Control Shift and D, right, or maybe not, I was going to duplicate that finger several times, so that I've got 4 different fingers. Of these fingers though are all the same length, and I think the fingers on a real hand are not all the same length. If you look here, it's important that you try and get the length as accurate as you can to your reference. Hopefully this hand, what you want in the end is, if you take it out of this program or if you keep it in Zbrush to sculpt it, is you want it so that you can get the hand and make it into a fist. If you make the fingers not the right length, like you weren't too careful and you just had all the fingers kind of ending at a line that's got an arc like that, it'd be very difficult to make the character form a fist where the fingers kind of fitted together. So what you should do is try and look on the fingers here at where one finger ends relative to another, like this index finger, it ends here like roughly on this person at the middle of the middle finger's fingernail, and that's kind of the same for the ring finger. I do believe this one is here. The little finger, its end is kind of midway through the first knuckle of the ring finger. And also look at where these knuckles are relative to one another. Notice that the fingers haven't only got different lengths here, but also down here at their base. Let me zoom back a bit. If you look at the knuckles, they kind of are arranged in an arc like this, like a different arc, a kind of gentler arc to that there, and it's important to get this set up correctly also. So what I'll do is, the thumb is going to be on the right hand side here, so if I'm saying this is my middle finger, let me just turn off the colorize so you can see which is the active subtool. We're saying this one that's highlighted now, that's the middle finger. Right, well I need to make this finger here shorter and also be further back. The base, the knuckle here for the middle finger is there, and the knuckle for the ring finger is slightly back, like that. Something like that. And I want the end of it to be kind of slightly further back than halfway up the fingernail of the middle finger. So what I can do is perhaps use my transpose tool here. Use it in its move function, that kind of, there we go, scale, something like that. The pinky finger, with that one I think it's worth scaling the finger to be a bit smaller and moving it backwards. So its knuckle is here, so they're kind of going backwards like that. And I want the end here to be at the first knuckle there, so something like that. And then over here, this finger, there you go, something like that. One thing that's worth doing also is sometimes in some anatomical drawings they try and say that they try and show that these fingers, the middle, the ring and the index finger, they try and group them together, something like that's all the tendons that run from back here up towards these three fingers. You should try and make a rhythm in the hand that includes these three fingers as one kind of element, and then this finger, your index finger, as like a separate element, something like that. If you look at the gaps between the fingers here, the gap between the index finger and the middle finger can tend to be a little bit larger than these two gaps here. If you, well, it is on my hand. If you put your fingers together, you'll see the gap. There's a slightly bigger gap here between the middle finger and the index finger compared to the ring, the middle finger, the index ring finger, the pinky finger, and the middle finger. Like these two gaps are quite small, and this one here, A, is quite large. So when you're arranging your fingers, if you try and do that too, it'll make it look a bit better. If you're trying to pose the hand to be natural as well, pose it something like you can see here in this reference, where you have the fingers not all like straight soldiers, okay, but perhaps you have the middle fingers being straight, and then you have the ring finger being a little bit angled outwards towards the outside of the hand, and then the pinky finger being something a bit like that. Okay, like that. I'll bring back the palm. You can see when I look at the front how the shape of the palm. I'll just actually, I'm just going to rotate it over a little bit. There you go. So that was so. This point here and that point are kind of flat, something like that. You can see how the fingers are actually quite a long way away from the beginning of the palm. So what I'm going to do is just fix that. One thing you can do as well is when you get towards the pinky finger, not only can you move it so it's, you know, the base of the pinky finger is touching the palm, but also rotate it a little bit so the fingernail's pointing outwards a little bit, and that'll make it seem a bit more naturalistic, and less like you place the fingers there in Zbrush. There we go, and that's making it like, okay, you know, you can believe that's going to be a you can believe that's going to be a hand. Now, one thing I have done is I realised is actually, if this is the finger's over here, and your thumb is over here. So I need to, I've actually got the palm the wrong way round. But what I could do is, if I get my transpose tool and do that with it, then that's reversed it. Unfortunately, all the polygons in it are facing the wrong way. So if you go down to display properties, you can press flip, and it'll flip the direction the normals are on the polygons, and then you've got then it's right, is what it is. So what I can do now is I think I'm going to try and make a bit of a thumb. Now, what I've tended to do when I've made a thumb is perhaps get one of the fingers and duplicate it. I'm not sure why today the duplicate is usually Shift and Control and D, but it's not working. But if I duplicate one of the fingers, like I duplicate that finger there, there we go. So this is going to become the thumb. The thumb has it's got from the wrist going down. Here we go. From the wrist here going down to the tip, it's got 3 different metacarpals in it, just like each finger does. So it's got like one bone there, another bone there, another bone there, like that. In your fingers, however, you've got 3 metacarpals, like 1, 2, and 3. But then you've also got metacarpals here going from the wrist down to the knuckle. So in your thumb, you've only got 2. You might say you've only got 2 knuckles, really, two joints there. So what you can do, what I've tended to do traditionally, is go and perhaps, because your thumb is a bit thicker and flatter, perhaps get a finger and widen it like that. Make it a bit fatter like that. There we go. And chop it off. So, oops. If I go and, I don't know, usually what you can do is, if I make a mask like that, there we go, there's, oh. There we go, do something like that. Usually what I would have done is I would have used Control and Shift on the keyboard to chop off the section that was formerly here, and then delete it and fill it in. But unfortunately, the same shortcuts that allow me to draw on the screen are also the same ones that for the mask. So I just made a per polygon mask and then just flattened it like that. What you can do then is I'm going to take this thumb that I've made. I think that when we look at thumb here, if I look at like that distance compared to that distance, it's about the same. On here, it's not. So what I think I'm going to do is perhaps use the Move tool. There you go, something like that. So you've got more kind of equidistance between the different knuckles. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate it and put it into place. Now when you put the thumb here, put the thumb in on the hand, it's not on the same plane as are the fingers. This was a picture I could find here of the hand, and if you look here, if you look at the way the back of the hand is, like here, the thumb is actually on a plane going down, like that, where all the fingers would come off like that. So when you put your thumb in, you know, put it like so, angle downwards and outwards. If we look back here on this, this when I drew a pentagon on this before, this side here kind of continues on up the thumb. There we go. And I think what I'm going to do is try and get the move tool and bend that about a bit so it's... So that's how it's going to be a bit later on. There we go. That's not too bad. Just do that a bit to make those like they're going to be knuckles in a second. Okay, so that's something. So there you go. That's the thumb kind of in place. It's a bit rough. Could do with smoothing that a bit. There we go. Okay, but there you go. That's kind of hand as it you know, might ought to be. So I think what we want to do now is try and sculpt the palm so that it becomes a bit more shapely and good. Okay. I'm going to use, I think, the clay tool. And just round that off a little bit. Okay, and I think what I'm going to do is in between each of the fingers here, there's like a from the silhouette, from the edge of the silhouette of the palm going up here to between each of the knuckles. There's like a bit of a slope. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that in, remembering that the knuckles are going to be the distance from here to the knuckle, like this distance is going to be equal. So the knuckles are going to be something like that, curving around in kind of a rhythm, kind of like that. Just build up the knuckles a little bit. Try and create a little bit of webbing in between the fingers as well. Smooth that off here, make it a little bit less blocky. There we go, there's supposed to be a joint there. On the top of the hand, what you can do is there are these different tendons that run from muscles in the lower arm down through the carpal tunnel at the wrist, along here like this, to run down the fingers to allow you to operate your fingers. And on the back of the hand, especially if it's a man's hand, you can see these tendons on the back of the hand here, running from the wrist down to the knuckles like that. If you were doing perhaps a more feminine hand, or a hand that is someone with like a higher body mass index, then because there's more kind of subcutaneous fat on the body, the kind of skeletal features of like bony prominences and tendons tend to be hidden more by the fat. So if you're trying to do someone that's very thin, try to show these tendons a bit more, and these tendons they're here. But if you're trying to make the hand look more feminine, try and have this back of the hand area here be smoother. You can use, perhaps try using the standard brush for this. And here, when you start going towards the thumb from the back of the hand, you've got a rhythm on the surface of the hand that's like this. Okay, that goes down there. Like that, down and under to there, and that's what you can do. Something like that. Anyway, on the underside of the hand, there's like a pad across here, pads of fat, and also prominences here caused by muscle. So you should try and build up these three areas here. And when you build them up also, look at, you're probably best looking on your own hand for this, look at where these lines, on my hand there's a line there, it's saying something about my future. If you try and build up the hand, I don't know, and then build that up there to be in area D. If you try and build up the hand in these areas A, B and C, and then have creases where you've got lines on your hand, as I've drawn them in here, that'll give the underside of the hand like a good naturalistic looking shape. So there's usually a line that goes like this from between this finger and that finger there, up to here, I guess. And then on the side of the hand between the index finger and the thumb, sometimes you've got a line that goes like this. So I'm going to try and build up this area here. When you build it up as well, smooth it off. Don't be afraid to use the smooth tool. It's free. Sometimes if you're trying to make a lot of mass on part of the hand like here, the inflate tool's like a real friend. Smooth that off and try and make it not look so blocky anymore. That's it, smooth that down plenty. There we go. So it's kind of, when you start to put in these different features, you start to believe like, oh, this is a lot more like a hand now than it used to be. It used to be like a pentagonal block. Sometimes once you've built it up a bit like that, what you can do is you can There we go. There we go. On the hand here, often there are, when the hand's extended, you've got wrinkles that go. So it's worth trying to get from the thumb here on my hand, because it's the opposite way. Wrinkles that go like this. Might be worth trying to find those, perhaps with this standard tool. There we go, that's better. Wasn't built up enough before. There you go. If your hand isn't concave enough, remember you can use the move tool. That's always a good bit of a friend. And then try and add in some of these wrinkles. I'm trying to get a shape in the hand here, between them, going from the index finger round to the thumb, of being like something like that. Okay. Okay. Something like that. At the moment, you've got. I'm going to try and move to finish this off. So, there at the moment, you've still got the fingers, the thumb, and the palm separate objects, but you want to kind of bring them together, so you've got one continuous mesh. What you can do is you can merge them all together, make a copy and merge them all together, and then use Dynamesh to join and make a continuous mesh from these fingers up to the palm. But before I do that, I think I've just got to adjust the thumb, because if you look here, this knuckle is directly opposite this rhythm that runs down here, whereas on mine It's not, it's up here. So I'm going to just move that like so, and that's... Oh, that finger's all like... it's like a melted finger. There we go, just smooth that away like that. Okay, that's much better. And then I'll probably just pull that down a little bit. There we go. What I'm going to do is to join these all together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to merge and merge in the subtools palette here and press merge visible. And what that will do, it will create a copy. It won't merge what you can see here in front of us, but it creates a merged object, a new object here in the tools palette. Here it is. If I click on it, there you go, and you can see it's all highlighted because it's only one subtool altogether. And then what I can do is if I call this, if I rename this as hand, I don't know, combined. What I can do then is if I go back to my original hand here, which is made out of all the different subtools, if I append that hand combined into this one, so you've got so you've actually got, if I just move these apart so you can see, I've actually got like this hand merged together and all the different subtools here. If I press the solo button here, so actually we're just looking at just the single hand combined. If I make it into a Dynamesh object, if you make it into a Dynamesh object, but set the resolution be perhaps quite low, there we go, then that'll merge together all of the different elements. So now if I get the smooth tool out here, I can see, there you go, I can just smooth that all together, smooth as you like. Like so. And that's really good. One good thing is if you merge things together, merge a Dynamesh object like that together, if you press Shift and F, if it used to be made out of multiple different subtools, this has, you can see the new polygons take on a different polygroup depending on whether they were kind of parented or whether they were kind of created from one different subtool or another. So that's really useful, so that later on if you want to take this on and really polish it, it's very easy now to go, okay, I want to separate the palm from everything else. I'll press Control Shift and click on it, and then it'll you can separate that out. But I can't do that because that's also the shortcut for this drawing. But that's just one feature I thought that's worth showing to you. What I'm going to do, I'm just smoothing out the transition between one subtool and another. So that it's not so mega, it's not so like, oh, that's obviously where one subtool began and another one ended. On the fingers here, I was saying earlier on about tendons. You can see these tendons running down the hand to the knuckle. Well, they also run on from this knuckle here onto this finger here, onto this knuckle and down the hand there. So it can be worth, rather than just trying to smooth it away so that you end up with a kind of like this kind of ski run concave area here. What it can be worth doing is going and getting the clay brush and building up like that and then smoothing off. So you're trying to smooth the transition between like this between this knuckle and this one here by building this area up like that. Here, between the fingers here, at these points, here, here and here, you want to kind of try and make it a bit concave, here and here and here. So that's what I'm going to try and do a little bit. Try and build up this area of the pinky finger there for the tendon. There we go, and try and build up the knuckle there a little bit as well. And just try to smooth it off so it doesn't look so heavily worked. Fill this in a bit more. Try and help there be kind of a creases that come round like that. Try and make like a crease on the inside of the hand, like here and here and here and here. Using the standard tool for that with one of these alphas that has a hot point in the like a hot spot in the center. There we go. Now this is, I think this is, there's a lot more polishing really that needs to happen. Looking at the reference and going back to going back and polishing it really and trying to get it as it ought to be. But you can see here one thing you can do to perhaps draw this video to a close, just to make this a bit more to make this more finished is you can see when I did the Dynamesh, I did it at quite a low resolution so that it was easy to work and make smooth the transition between the original fingers and the palm and the thumb. Now unfortunately that's meant all the kind of detailing of the knuckles and of the fingernails is kind of lost, but what you can do is, because here in my subtools I've still got all of the old fingers and all of the old knuckles and things like that. If I can pull them apart for you like that. There we go. What I can do is I can project. We'll just hide that for a second. I can project the detail from these fingers and the thumb back onto the fingers that I already have and make the fingers look really detailed. So that's what I'm going to do just to finish here. So what I need to do is just subdivide the model, perhaps once or twice more, so now it's 500,000 polygons. Then if you mask off the fingers, so I'm pressing Control on the keyboard to give those per polygon masks like that. There we go. Also for the thumb, for the fingernail for the thumb. There we go. And if you press Shift D to go down the subdivision levels, and then just blur that a little bit. Want to make sure to include the knuckles. There you go. Go back up the subdivision levels. Just inverted the mask now, so when I press Project in a second, all the bits that are light are going to get projected and become as they ought to, hopefully. If you go into Project and then press Project All, provided like I've got solo mode on, which just means that I only see this subtool the active subtool at the moment. But as long as you've got all these visibility toggles turned on for all the other fingers and all the thumbs and the palms and things like that going up all the subtools here, when you press Project after a short break, maybe after a bit of thought, then what it'll do, it'll project the shape of all those fingers onto the subtool that's the combination of the palm and all the fingers like that. Sometimes what you might find is here you have artifacts like this. Here behind the pinky finger's knuckle, it's kind of got a little bit of raised area that didn't quite get caught. That's because if I just press Ctrl Z and go back, you've got this project all scan distance value here. If you increase that slightly, what it'll mean is that little bit of finger that was the bit that didn't get projected, it was just too far away from this subtool that we've got selected at the moment. But now I've increased this project all distance here to the right of the project button. When you press Project, what you should find is that shouldn't happen. Well, you know, well, it did. Okay, so that's it. If we try once more, maybe if you increase it. Okay, third time lucky. I've set it all the way to a distance of 1. If it doesn't work, then well, it didn't work. Never mind. But if you have a problem where there's just a bit like that it won't project, increasing that can help. It didn't help for me, so I'm just going to smooth that, and we'll keep that to ourselves. All right. There we go, and just smooth that little bit out there. But now, I'm not saying that's absolutely realistic and super finished, but there you go. You've got a fit hand that's a going concern that you can add perhaps veins to, or look at your reference more and get the shapes of the tendons in the back of the hand and the shapes of the lines on the hand to be more lifelike. But that's the end of this tutorial. By no means is this tutorial all conquering and includes everything you need to know to make a hand that's absolutely like a photo, but it's a good start, and it's the type of things that I wanted to know about how to most easily make a hand in about 2 hours or something like that. So I hope this was useful to you, and goodbye.